The following program contains shocking amounts of primary sources. If you suffer from addiction to rumors, this show might not be right for you. Check with your cheerleading captain.
Proclaiming the truth in the highways and byways of the world. Fighting for justice in the dark alleys of politics. Raising the voice of resistance to a fevered pitch. The man who creates social tension just by walking into the room, Randall Terry.
Hey, what are you looking at? Out of touch? Yeah, with your politically correct nonsense. That's why we have a grandmother say the things that you are afraid to say. Take it away, Jihad Granny.
Allah Akbar, good morning, boys and girls. You know the bombing that took place in that filthy nest in Iraq? Well, good news. We are about to do the same thing. I mean, you know, my boys. In Egypt, we are going to spread the peace of Islam everywhere.
We're in part 4 of our 5-part series on Sharia law. I want to let you know that there are some images in this episode that are disturbing. We're going to look at what will happen when we take the sword out of Islam's hands, and we're also going to see how Sharia law is woven into the constitution of Muslim nations. It better not make it to this nation, or we will cease to be free. Let's go to the series. As I said at the beginning, take the sword out of Islam's hand, and it will perish of its own weight. Let's look at Article 26. This would be laughable if it wasn't so tragic. This is about human rights in Saudi Arabia. The state protects human rights in accordance with the Islamic Sharia. That's it. The state protects rights in accordance with the Islamic Sharia. Well, in other words, you don't have the right to expression. You don't have the right to practice your religion. You don't have the right to change your religion. Here's Article 39. Information, publication, and other media shall employ courteous language and the state's regulations, and they shall contribute to the education of the nation and the bolstering of its unity. All acts that foster sedition or division or harm the state's security and its public relations or detract from man's dignity and rights shall be prohibited. The statutes shall define all that. In other words, freedom of press, expression, no. It's forbidden in their constitution, which is anchored in Sharia law. Here's Article 48. The courts will apply the rules of Islamic Sharia in the cases that are brought before them, in accordance with what is indicated in the book and the Sunnah, and statutes decreed by the ruler which do not contradict the book or the Sunnah. Friend, I'll stop. I could keep going with the Saudi Arabian constitution, but I want you to see and to be able to talk to your friends about the direct connection between Sharia law in Islamic nations and the suppression of human rights, the violation of human rights, the crushing of human rights, and the suffering of men and women and children in those nations who try and practice a different religion than Islam. They suffer for it. Some of them with the loss of their property, their jobs, their freedom, their lives. You've got 4 ancient schools of Sharia scholars, and if all 4 of them agree on something, then it is considered Islamic dogma, and it can't change. So, as I said at the beginning, the question is Islamic Sharia incompatible with basic human rights, freedom of religion, etc.? Now let's bear in on Muslim nations and Muslim individuals. Does a Muslim have the freedom to, quote, change his religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in community with others and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching? Can a non-Muslim freely practice his religion in a nation whose legal structure is self-consciously based on Sharia law? All right, let's look at the crime of apostasy under Sharia law. When a Muslim leaves Islam and embraces another religion. Say he becomes a Christian, a Catholic, a Coptic Christian, whatever. The penalty for a man exercising this basic human right is death. I quote, "In pre-modern Islamic law, there is general agreement among the jurists that the punishment for apostasy is death, and that the implementation of this penalty is obligatory on Muslims. This is largely based on the hadith, the words of Muhammad, quote, whoever changes his religion, kill him. That's what Muhammad said. His conversion is considered a crime against God as well as treason against him and treason against the Muslim community. Now what follows are judgments from two of the four ancient Islamic jurists. The Hanafites say, quote, if he needs time to reconsider, it is desirable that the judge allow him a 3-day extension, during which he is to remain in custody. If he accepts Islam thereafter, it is good. If not, he is to be killed. For Allah says, to kill those who believe in many gods, without fixing a deadline. The Prophet also said, kill him who changes his religion, without mentioning a delay, because the apostate is simply a hostile unbeliever. All right, here's what the Malachites say. If he repents after 3 days' time, he is to be released. But if he does not, he is to be killed on the 3rd day at sunset. His corpse is to be neither washed nor embalmed. He is to be buried neither in the cemeteries of the Muslims nor in the unbelievers, the kuffar, for he is not one of them, having once been a Muslim. In fact, his body is to be thrown upon the ground as a public example. That from one of the scholars of Sharia law. Now, clearly, this is in total opposition to basic human rights and any international treaty regarding human rights. We'll be right back.
If my cloud has a silver lining, it's only to store electricity for the lightning.
Moments with Moses. Cursed shall you be when you come in, and cursed shall you be when you go out.
Pay close attention to what you're learning, and then you can teach others about Sharia law. Now, in fairness to the 3 Islamic authors that I was quoting above, while they are giving a historically and juridically accurate rendition of the Sharia law and the penalty for apostasy, these jurists are attempting to mitigate the death penalty by suggesting, for example, that only in the case of a Muslim becoming a hostile combatant, joining an enemy army, all right, an army of infidels, only then should he actually be killed. However, those 3 jurists, including the one who used to be the head of the Pakistani court, they admit that they are out of the mainstream on Orthodox Islam and Orthodox Muslim legal theories. And believe me, it's a strong tide to swim against. Others who have swum against that tide have been murdered. Now, in the case of a woman who leaves Islam, this is just a little bit more merciful. And this is what we read, quote, all jurists believe that both men and women can become apostates. As to punishment, the Hanafis agree that an apostate woman should not be put to death, but instead be forced to accept Islam. If she refuses, she should be beaten and imprisoned until she returns to Islam or dies. That's Sharia law, friends. You women, think about it. If you lived in an Islamic state and you were a Muslim woman, and then you decided to become a Christian and it was found out, they take you, they say, come back, and you say no, and then they start to beat you. There are records of women literally being imprisoned and then being beaten daily, and asked, do you want to come back to Islam? And they beat them, and then they just keep them in prison. And this goes on until they crack or until they die. Now, one reason that so-called moderate Muslim jurists are facing such difficulties, the moderates, is due to the fact that Islam is a closed system of thought on certain issues. Once the ancient revered scholars reach a consensus, the matter is final, it's closed. In other words, if something is true, it's true for all time. Muslims believe in absolutes. They don't believe in moral relativism. And Sharia law is true, and it's true for all time, and it can't be changed. And another reason that these moderates have such a hard time is because the historical record is so clear and extensive regarding what Muhammad himself said concerning those where they professed faith in his mission and then said, no, I'm out of here. They apostatized. I quote, Allah's apostle said, the blood of a Muslim who confesses that none has the right to be worshipped but Allah and that I am his apostle cannot be shed except in 3 cases. In cases of murder, a married person who commits illegal sexual intercourse, and the one who reverts from Islam, an apostate, and leaves the Muslims. From the mouth of Muhammad himself. To try and change or subvert Islamic orthodoxy in points of law or theology such as this one is to question and quarrel with Muhammad himself or even God himself. And this is also considered a crime. And it has resulted in a lot of moderate Muslim scholars being threatened or killed throughout the Middle East. Books have been written on it. PBS did a special on it. Muslim professors who say, maybe we should just try and separate Islam and Sharia. Fatwas are issued against them, and they have been killed. All right, let's quickly look at some current abuses of human rights under Sharia law. Violations of human rights in discussion in these 3 nations, Pakistan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, as well as most other Islamic nations, are well documented, they are widespread, they are systemic, and in some ways they're systematic, it's choreographed. The United States Commission on International Religious Freedom places all 3 of those nations in the top 8 of its countries of particular concern. And that body of people is the only independent government body in the world tasked with focusing solely on religious freedom. The crimes that they document against individuals include arrest, detention, disappearance, their bodies are simply never found, murder, and the state crime of impunity, where the state is guilty of a crime. Impunity is when, and I quote, the state failure to prevent or punish religious freedom violations. And this body of people documents how the absence of accountability breeds lawlessness and the breakdown of justice. This is impunity, and it encourages individuals to attack and even kill those who dissent from or fail to embrace others' religious views. This happens in Egypt, it happens in Pakistan, where individuals or a mob will literally kill Christians. The authorities know who did it, and they don't prosecute them because of Sharia law. We'll be right back. Success cannot be guaranteed. There are no safe battles. Sir Winston Churchill. I hope that you're getting the message, friends. Sharia law is incompatible with basic human rights. Watch the rest. Well, Nobel laureate, and I might pronounce her name incorrectly, Shirin Ebadi, she's a Muslim woman. She bemoans this practice and its reasoning. She says, and I quote, international human rights laws are breached under the pretext of cultural relativity. Some Muslims, under the pretext that democracy and human rights are not compatible with Islamic teachings and the traditional structure of Islamic societies, have justified despotic governments and continue to do so. You see, Islamic ideology demands that the safety of the ummah, the community, that the safety of the ummah means that they've got to be protected from the corruption of religion and morals. And this requires that those in authority suppress the individual practice of religion, the preaching of the gospel, the questioning of Muhammad's legitimacy. I mean, the logic is simple. Inherent in a Muslim's apostasy, or for that example, a Catholic or a Coptic Christian's assertion that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, the Savior of the world, inherent in that is the contention that Muhammad is not the true prophet. And such a declaration is a crime of blasphemy under Sharia law, for which non-Muslims and Muslims who convert to Christianity have to be arrested and end up being brutalized. But it is this very expression of Christian belief and conscience that must be protected as a fundamental human right. As the European Court of Human Rights ruled in the Sunday Times case, they said, this is fun, the freedom of expression is applicable not only to information or ideas that are favorably received or regarded as inoffensive or as a matter of indifference, but also to those that offend, shock, or disturb the state or any sector of the population. So, on one hand, the Saudi Constitution claims to protect human rights in accordance with Islamic Sharia. But in practice, it brazenly rejects human rights. It rejects human rights laws. In fact, the Saudi Arabian Market Information Resource, all right, this is a branch of Saudi Arabia, boldly explains Saudi Arabia's position concerning human rights under Sharia law. It says, quote, "It is the fundamental assumption of the polity of Saudi Arabia that the Holy Quran is more suitable for Saudi Muslims than any other secular constitution. This assumption must be viewed in the context of a nation which is completely Islamic." Yeah, I wonder why. Hence, no churches, no synagogues, or temples, or shrines of other religions exist. No proselytizing by other faiths is allowed. Those are the words coming right out of Saudi Arabia. Pakistan, Egypt have not only similar words, but similar practices. Why does this situation persist? Why do international news stories continually emerge about people suffering brutal abuses with the approval or the involvement of these governments? I'm going to give you two main reasons, in my opinion. First, we see a lack of outrage and action because of the lack of a significant impact on the domestic populations of the nations that can and should sometimes do something. In other words, hey, how does this affect people in the United States? England, it's kind of horrible that that's happening, but what's the cost of a gallon of milk right now? What's the cost of a loaf of bread? So until there is a domestic reason to get involved, like the cost of a gallon of gas, sometimes foreign or Western governments that really do believe in human rights, they don't get involved because there's not an outcry from their domestic populations. I think that a more compelling reason, the second reason, that great powers maintain a hands-off policy, and these again are nations who allegedly cherish human rights, is because of the end game of intervention in the internal affairs of a sovereign nation. I mean, ultimately, if you're going to do something, you're talking about forcible intervention. The Nuremberg trials happened after war, okay? So to physically curtail the abuses of human rights, such as what happened in Rwanda, involves intervention, force, war. Dr. Oscar Schachter said, "Whether or not one is ready to justify such sanctions, it is clear enough that the enforcement of human rights might not be compatible with the maintenance of peace. The antinomy is evident on the one hand. Respect for human rights is a condition conducive to peace, and on the other hand, its implementation may well be a cause of war." Friend, we're going to wrap this up. We've asked the question, is Islamic Sharia law compatible with basic human rights, with international treaties or laws concerning human rights, the human rights of freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, and freedom of expression? The answer, beyond doubt, is no. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Both we and our fathers have sinned. We have committed iniquity. We have done wickedly. Friend, there are some things that simply cannot be reduced to a bumper sticker, and we have to learn. I have a series for you called What Would Muhammad Do? For a gift of any size, you can get all 10 parts. A gift of any size. Go to terrycast.com and order the series, What Would Muhammad Do?